we are probably going to upset a lot of people with the amount of times we say autism in this video, but quite frankly, at this point, I don't give a shit anymore.
Well, to be fair, let's look at it from a pure marketing point of view, right? What is the main user base of our videos?
Incels and autists?
Yes. Well done, Dave. Now, let's look at, what's that whole phrase thing about holding up a mirror to yourself in reality or some bullshit? Is that what we're doing?
I think you're giving us way too much credit there, mate. I think we're just screaming into the void at this point.
We've not actually mentioned the name of what we're covering.
No, we haven't. We've kind of danced around the subject. So, Mobile Suit Gundam. We are doing Mobile Suit Gundam.
Excuse me, Dave. You need to give it the proper name.
I'm not doing that. So it's the age-old tale of a single father and sole competent man in the universe trying to raise a ship full of space autistic child soldiers as they battle space Nazis.
You can't say that word.
I said both autism and Nazis in that sentence, and even saying Nazis is probably going to get me cancelled by someone in the comments section because Xeon fans are fucking weird. Speaking of Xeon fans, hey Rob, how are you? How are you getting on, buddy?
I'm not a fan of Xeon.
Oh, sorry, yes, Titans, I forgot. That's
based.
Best hair in the game.
Wait, have we ever covered Zeta Gundam yet?
We've not even covered fucking Mobile Suit Gundam, mate. How the fuck would we have covered Zeta?
Because it's really good.
We're not good at this. We are very bad at this. We covered fucking Stardust Memories before we ever covered Mobile Suit Gundam. We are incredibly bad at this.
That's still my favorite anime because it is the Alex Jones anime.
What?
Stardust Memories is the one where they'll make like fake 9/11 and then the Titans seize power through a fascist regime. How is that not Alex Jones the anime?
Okay, I see your point. So Mobile Suit Gundam, or I guess we could also call it Gundam 0079. It is a 1979 anime television series created by Yoshiyuki Tomino and those chaps over at Sunrise. This is the progenitor Gundam series. This is the original and some would argue the best.
I would argue this is probably my favorite sci-fi series outside of Star Trek, but at the same time I consider this as good as Star Trek, so Dave will understand how much of a compliment that is from me, considering how much Star Trek he has to edit out with these videos.
So many Star Trek references. It's getting unhealthy now. I'm growing concerned. Gundam, well, we'll just call this Gundam, okay? Because otherwise I'm not saying Mobile Suit Gundam every single time. That's gonna get fucking silly. So when I say Gundam in this video, I am probably referring to this specific series rather than the franchise as a whole. We gotta clarify these things. It's important.
So let's talk about Mobile Suit Gundam 0079, just so I know everyone else watching the videos since Dave decided to set some kind of standard.
I don't know why I expected anything different.
Rob, please cooperate with me with making animes. No, or refuse, and I will set my own goddamn rules about what we're doing.
I'm not even surprised at this point.
Do not tread!
Gundam was kind of
well, it's the first sci-fi anime that's actually hard sci-fi.
Please don't say stuff like that, because there's going to be some fucking reply guy in the comment section going, actually, and...
Actually, it was actually Astrophysics. That was totally...
Shut the fuck up.
Can I just stress at this point as well, now that we're 2,000 subscribers in, these are all done without scripts, and I'm not going back and changing anything, okay? I am too lazy, and it is too much fucking effort.
Do you honestly think that I'm in any way scripted? Have you seen some of the rants I've done?
No, they haven't, because I can't put those up, because
oh, right, okay, because,
up, we would be immediately cancelled, and we would deserve
Robert and his consequences have been a disaster for the Wee Heart channel.
Yes, it has. Just to make sure that we've covered all the details for the series as a whole, it began in April 1979 and finished airing in January 1980. It was originally gonna have a 52 episode run, but for reasons that we will get onto very shortly, it didn't have that, and it ultimately wound up having only 43 episodes.
I always find it funny it got its episodes cut and still managed to get a beach episode in.
I think that's the episode that Tomino has come out and said he hates and should have been cut from the original run because it contributes nothing and he hates it. Our boy Tomino.
I think you'll find the term is it was based and beach pilled.
The main plot of that episode is there is a fucking Xeon pilot doing boxing with his Xeon suit instead of shooting guns. It's a dumb episode. He's not wrong.
As I said again, it is based and beach pilled. I will not repeat these facts. I am 100% correct. Oh shit, Dave. Is it the time where we do the summary of the show?
I kind of already did that. Like I said, sole competent man in the universe making a bunch of child soldiers fight space Nazis.
I mean, Char's not really space Nazi. He's like a space Napoleon.
Char is doing Char things. Char does whatever the fuck Char does.
Char is space Louis Napoleon. Like, what more do you want to know? It's the year Universal Century 0079. And space bullshit's going on. Space wars and shit. And then Gundam's invented or some bullshit. Then the show starts. And then some kids or some bullshit fight their way from the moon to Earth. And then back into space.
They're not on the moon, Robert. They're on side 7.
They go to the moon though.
Shit, we're real bad at this.
Eh.
How the fuck have 2,000 people subscribed to this?
Who watches this? What the fuck?
I don't know.
So they go from side 7 to the moon, and then they go to Earth.
And all the while they're getting chased by this mad lad in a red Zaku. Every single time, like the episode basically starts with them going like, whew, thank God, I think we finally lost Char. And then in the distance you just hear Char going, what was that you just said, you little bitch?
This is the bit where you play Char's theme.
It's a very good theme.
I knew
WKD, it's not a fucking Blue Wicked, Robert.
I
Classy
don't know.
bitch.
He does a cover.
Andrew WK. Yeah, it was only released in Japan, but it's pretty great. You can get it on YouTube, listen to it. He does the full cover of Giran Zabi's speech. It's basically.
There's like 3 characters.
There's a bunch of them. How could you forget Job John, Robert?
Who?
Job John.
Who?
The second most competent man on the white base after Bright Noah. Never has a breakdown, never complains, never bitches, doesn't run away, just does his fucking job like an absolute champ. Our boy, Job John. Thank you, no questions at this time.
Who? I think you'll find there's only 2 characters. There is Amuro and Hayato Kobayashi. The guy who drives the gun tank, I think. Come on, if there's one person to be described as based, is the guy who takes the gun tank into battle.
Only man on the white base who doesn't turn into a new type because he's that shit.
Actually, he comes into a new type later. I made that up, he doesn't.
Bright does either, but that's because he doesn't need to be, because he's just too based. The universe was like, no, he's too powerful and too competent. If he ascends to new typeness, he will probably melt the space-time continuum. I really like Bright Noah. I don't know if that came across yet.
Also, bullshit. Bright Noah receives like fucking telepathic messages. Fucking he is at least slightly fucking new typey.
I don't know, man. I'm looking at the wiki. It says old type. I'm just reading
I'm just saying, I've watched enough Gundam to know that he can read other people's bullshit thoughts.
I think he's just his own type. He's just Bright type.
Interesting.
Comes with the powers of sheer competence. Basically, what the Federation should have done is they should have just put Bright Noah in charge of everything, and the war would have been over in 2 weeks, and a utopia would have followed. Yes, he marries Mirai or whatever her name is.
It's not Frau.
No, Frau marries Kobayashi.
Bad life choices.
Very bad life choices.
It's whoever Lieutenant Slager's trying to slag her.
Slager. Ah, what a Chad. Apart from the part where he just fucking pimp slaps a woman for no reason. It's like, bruh, you can't do that.
You can. It was the 70s. You can do what you want, Dave.
It's not the 70s though. It's Universal Century 79. You can't do that.
Dave, even if you're using Universal Century, what year is it?
It was apparently acceptable in the Universal Century, almost 80s.
Indeed. I still think my favorite thing about Slager is the fact that he's based on looking like Sylvester Stallone, and that's how Tomino wrote him and imagined him, and then Yaz had never seen the movie, so he had to just make it up, so he had no idea what he was supposed to be drawing.
Is that seriously how that came about?
Yes. Like
that makes a lot of sense.
like,
in terms of other characters on the white base, you've got Frau Bo, who starts off as like Amuro's bestie, though that falls apart as the series goes on. She's largely the kind of moral center of the crew. She's the one who looks after the kids, and she's team mum, basically. She's team mum. She's nice enough. Yeah, it's fine. And then you've got Salem Mass, who is, I think, a medical student, and she initially is kind of part of the bridge crew, but later takes on a more combat-oriented role, and she's the one that everyone gets thirsty for, so we've got to mention that. Y'all are a pack of fucking degenerates. Anyway, let's talk about the Principality of Zeon, who are like the bad guys, I guess.
I don't know. I wouldn't class Zeon as the bad guys, Dave.
Kind of are?
No. There are good and bad people on both sides, Dave.
Some, I presume, are good people, but the Principality of Zeon are not sending their best people.
So there's Sharaznabal, the Zabis, Ramble Ral.
Rambaral. What a fucking lad.
Champ.
Principality of Zeon's quite an interesting one, because it's like this faction that started off with all these great ideals, and then big man, what's his name?
Degwin.
Have you heard of Hitler? Yeah, he comes along and probably had the founder of Zeon, appropriately called Zeon, assassinated, and then he took over and turned it into a dictatorship, and now his family run everything. You've got our boy Shar Aznabal, or whatever the fuck his original name is.
It's Casvel.
Casvel Rem Daikun, and then he's also known as
Edward Mass and Quattro Bagina and then the Red Comet, and then he gets reborn in that other anime where he's like, his soul comes back to fuck some shit up.
Let's not talk about that.
It's a good show.
It's getting silly.
And then there's Alfrancha Char, which is a clone made from the Zeon remnants who try to overthrow it. Like, come on.
I get why everyone fucking loves Char, honestly.
Char is the dude.
The second he shows up in this series, he is the coolest motherfucker in the room.
Some of the people went on to make great stuff. We talk about a lot about Tamino because, we like Tamino. He's a pretty good guy.
Sure, you make a good point. We haven't actually covered any of the people who are involved in this.
Indeed. So, like, Tamino's one we always go on about.
We've talked about Tamino a bunch, but we haven't really specifically focused on himself, I guess. So, take it away, Rob.
Well, basically, his before Gundam stuff is all he's a lot smaller scale, but he was a director and he did a lot of Osamu Tezuka stuff. So he did, I believe it's Triton of the Sea, which is like, it's a boy that rides a dolphin, if I remember rightly, around Atlantis or some bullshit. And then he also did like Brave Riding,
I think it is.
which is like his first mecha work, and it's all like magical super robot bullshit.
Yeah, it's a super robot series, 100%. And just quickly, since this is going to come up probably quite a bit, we should probably do a quick definition of what super robot means versus what real robot means. So these are two variants of the mecha genre. At the time, before Gundam came along, you really only had super robots, which is kind of a more... I don't want to insult the genre, okay, because there's a lot of really fucking great super robot stuff, but it tends to be a bit more super heroic in its designs. The robots and mechs themselves are godlike entities, more or less. It tends to have a little bit more of a light tone, a bit more monster of the week. Of course, when I say this, there are always exceptions to this rule, but that's the broad brushstrokes of it. Whereas real robots, which is the genre that Mobile Suit Gundam pioneers, it's trying to run counter to that. It's trying to oppose that particular style. So it's a lot more grounded, it's a lot more gritty and visceral. It tends to have a much more heavy focus on hard sci-fi, and the robots themselves, the mechs themselves, aren't these super heroic entities. They are straight up war machines.
So he's this guy who works on all this super robot stuff. He finds it so disappointing, and then he goes on to create Real Robot, which is the mecha genre I personally enjoy.
I think super robot gets a bit of a bad rap, and I'm probably guilty of doing it just a moment ago as well. When I'm saying it's more zany and cartoony and magical, I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Well, Mega XLR is completely a super robot show.
100%.
And it's awesome.
So when we say that these things, that's not necessarily criticism. It's just the way it be, my man.
I'm a big fan of the character designer Yoshikazu Yasuko, but he's known as Yaz.
Yaz is a lot easier. I appreciate that.
He's the Gundam guy. He's the guy who designs all the star stuff, and then he goes on and he does the beautiful Gundam The Origin. By the way, in case you haven't realized that, every single one of those pieces are watercolored art.
He's credited as the character designer, but then you've also got the mechanical designer as well, which is a man we've mentioned before, which is Kunio Okawada.
They kind of work together, basically. It's the only way to describe it.
From what I've read, those two worked really, really closely on both the Gundam and mecha side of it, and also the character designs of it. The character designs in this are very good, to be fair. It's the reason why Char has become so iconic.
Yaz is like, he's just too important for me not to shitpost about. Like, he's the Gundam character designer, he's the Yamato, he did all the storyboards, he does Crusher Joe, he does so many fantastic manga. The other thing is the music guys. One of them is Takeo Watanabe. He's the guy who did Cutie Honey's theme song, and he's also the one who did Lone Wolf and Cub, which, if you've not seen, are some of the greatest band films in the UK. It's a good movie, and Margaret Thatcher banned it. What more do you want to watch?
We have established the fact that we do not like the Margaret Thatcher on this channel. It's okay.
She took away the milk.
Just to mention with Kunio Okawada again, he is the first man ever to have been credited with the role of mechanical designer. That was not a thing before Mobile Suit Gundam came along. So again, a very pioneering show, very pioneering man. I don't think anyone could deny that the designs of the mecha in this show are iconic. Like, they are just instantly recognizable. The Gundam is a very unique looking mech. You immediately know what it is. The Zaku as well. And it works really well for contrasting the two sides with their designs. I've ranted about this before. I'm going to do it again because fuck it, I don't care.
Before you go any further, right? As much as you're suggesting this man was completely, super intelligent and way ahead of his time with mecha design, he wanted Gundam to be called Gun Boy.
Yeah, they had some interesting ideas. And then some less interesting ideas. And then some downright fucking terrible ideas as well. Fortunately, he was not allowed to call it Gun Boy.
Thank God, imagine how mad people would be because it would be pronounced something stupid like Gunbui, and everyone would be mad that we're pronouncing it wrong. When it's translated as Gundam in this series, so fuck you.
And then, let's see, you've got Mitsuki Nakamura, who was the art director of Mobile Suit Gundam, who was also art director for Nautica of the Valley of the Wind and Fist of the North Star. So, shit, that guy's got some pedigree to him.
Play the theme song, Dave.
I'm not doing that. Oh, he did Megazone 23 as well.
Nice.
Shit, my guy. I mean, when you think of Gundam now, it's the Star Trek and the Star Wars of Japan. It is that big over there. But it didn't have the easiest of starts. It wasn't the overnight success that you might imagine a series like that would be. But then, that's true of Star Trek as well. But let's not talk about Star Trek. Otherwise, Rob will never shut the fuck up about it.
Yes. Please never watch Picard.
Is it that bad?
Dave, I think it's actually legitimately the worst thing I've ever tried to watch and wanted to like.
Is it worse than Discovery?
Yeah. Discovery's Reddit.
That's unfortunate.
I don't need to say anything more. You fully understand how mad I am.
So this series was sponsored by a load of toy companies such as Clover, and they wanted to make toys out of it. And then Tomino was like, I'm gonna make a really serious war drama.
Robert, why do you like Tomino and Gundam so much? He's my spirit animal, Dave.
And they were like, how the fuck are we gonna sell toys out of this? So naturally, the original planned 52 episodes were rapidly cut down to 39 episodes, although Tomino and his team were able to negotiate that to 43 because Clover was starting to panic about them sponsoring a TV series about, you know, the gritty realities of war, and that maybe not having the best marketability for their shit. Seriously, I looked up the original, like, metal models that they made for this. Those were terrible. No wonder no one fucking bought those.
It's just your standard fucking mecha at the time. Oh, okay. The show was mainly popular among older kids and young adults. Well, no wonder it appealed to the autistic fan base of We Are Giant Robots.
But yeah, Gundam was one of those series that was breaking a lot of conventions and doing its own thing, and that scared the investors and the sponsors. There was also quite a lot of disputes that Tomino had with sponsors about the design of certain things, so color schemes and how the Gundam looked. He was still really fucking mad about that, like 10, 15, 20 years later. He still was furious that they had to make the Gundam white and with like all these fancy colors and stuff, because as Rob has explained before, if you want to sell toys to kids, it's got to be like multicolored and shit.
I like colors, Dave. Bring me more colors.
So after the show kind of got cut, it wasn't doing well. In its first broadcast schedule, it didn't really find its audience because, again, everyone was like, I want a super robot show. And Tomino was like, no.
It's also to do with, wasn't it, like, the time it was put on as well?
It got shit canned.
Yeah, it's like the whole Star Trek meme as well. Not to bring up Star Trek to make Dave angry.
I knew. Okay, do you know what? I'll allow it. There are parallels. Tell us about Star Trek, Robert.
Well, it's basically the whole thing of that when it was first aired, no one watched it because, you know, it was, who the fuck knows what this shit is?
So to interrupt Rob's fucking spiel about Star Trek, it was kind of destined to be another one of those forgotten classics that you sometimes come across. But then the licensing rights reverted back to Bandai. And some clever bastard was like, hey, these robots would be really fucking cool as model kits. And then Gunpla happened. That was a really novel concept for the time. They were really, really inexpensive. The whole idea of having to assemble these models together, that was a pretty unique selling point, meant that they got quite popular. And then people got interested in finding out more about the series that they came from. And so Gundam had this second wind, and that was when Tomino was able to do the compilation movies, when it was rebroadcast, and it actually found its audience this time, and it found people who appreciated this whole new genre, effectively, that they were trying to do within mecha, this idea of the real robot genre. And it sparked a franchise, and then the original sponsors who shit-canned it went out of business, and Bandai is now making shit tons of money.
Christ, they have a show which is all about collecting Gunpla. Like,
yep, Build Fighters is pretty based.
I mean, it is. It is the...
It's Beyblade, but I'm fine with that. We were going to talk about the positives. So, yeah, Gundam changed absolutely everything about it.
This is like talking about how, like, yeah, it's more like Star Wars. It's like, what's good about Star Wars? It changed the shape of movies forever. What's good about Gundam? Wow.
Well, it
revolutionized anime forever. Gundam and its consequences.
They haven't been a disaster, however.
Have been a success for the human race.
Goddamn right. Yeah, as we mentioned, this is the pioneering series that created the real robots subgenre, and there is going to be someone in the comments section disagreeing with me about
It's
that.
actually not a V robot series.
I did not stutter.
Okay, retard.
But yeah, Gundam absolutely did change the whole genre. The idea of it being entirely human-based, so no aliens and stuff like that. The idea of it being this like grounded and gritty and pretty brutal in places war between these human factions, and the robots not being these super heroic entities, but war machines basically. And the whole aspect of like moral ambiguity in the plot as well is something that Tomino plays up.
It's why I keep shitposting you about there being no bad guys here, because they're legit, isn't
The
it?
Zabbies are more obvious as the villains, so like Cassilia and Gideon are pretty clearly villainous entities, but then they're kind of juxtaposed with Garma, who's more... Garma just wants to fuck. That is all Garma wants to do, and I respect his hustle.
What's the one with kids again?
Dozel.
Dozel Sabi's best.
He's probably the more stand-up, honorable of his family, who's trying to, do the right thing and be a good soldier and is respected by his men. So even within the Zabi family, whose dad literally murdered Space Gandhi, some of them are still pretty decent folks. They still take the time to show that there are soldiers fighting for the Zeon who are decent and upstanding people. Like there are the crew of that one ship that actually take the time to try and feed this refugee lady who's run off on her own and are trying to protect her. And then you've got all those guys who nearly blow up the Gundam, but then find themselves kind of rooting for Amuro and the rest of his crew, and then drive up at the end to kind of taunt him a little bit because they're absolute fucking chads. Those guys are great. It was like a bunch of fucking frat boys just came up and bullied Amuro and then left, and it's like, you're alright, bro.
Amuro deserved it. Just saying.
He did.
A lot of people shitpost about like Super Robot, for example. A lot of it's this weird patriotism coming from Japan, where they're like inventing Wunderwaffe to win the war. It's a lot of where the Super Robot thing comes from. For example, I think, what's it called? Is it Tetsun 28 Go? I don't know if that's right. I'm probably saying it horribly wrong, but basically the plot of the show is it's the final days of World War II, and they build a robot to fight the Americans. It's all this metaphors for stuff to do with World War II. And then Gundam comes along, and Gundam's this really gritty anti-war show. Gundam itself is like critiquing World War II Japan.
Yeah, it's a very philosophical show, actually, at points. It takes its time to consider the
Have you
ramifications.
ever heard of the man known as Hitler?
But it wants to show the consequences of what you normally see in a super robot show, which is, a teenage boy fighting in combat. And normally that's just fine and you don't need to worry about it. In this, Amuro has a really bad time.
It's almost like killing people, it's bad for you. When you kill people, they die.
Amuro feels like a really well-rounded character because he struggles with the weight of everything that's placed on him. He is responsible for the defense of the white base so often because he's the only one who can control this experimental prototype weapon well enough to fend off the people attacking them. But he's aware of the fact that, hey, I'm just a teenage kid. Why are you placing all these burdens on me? And he has to grow up so quickly throughout the show, but he's aware of this fact. He's aware that he's losing out on part of him, on his childhood, and having to shoulder the responsibility of fighting and taking the lives of other people. And so he's what happens if you actually took a super robot protagonist and threw him into the middle of a war. He's gonna struggle, and that makes him relatable. And so he's a very well-written character. And it's not just Amuro as well. All of the crew, even our boy Bright Noah, has a fucking breakdown halfway through from the stress of continuous combat. It's not exactly subtle, but it is very clear in its messaging. And that's a pretty unique spin on the genre at the time. One of the things that I was very impressed by was the sense of progression and development that you get all throughout Mobile Suit Gundam. Because again, it's coming off of this monster of the week kind of genre where super robots, they tend to be a bit cliche. Well, not, okay, how do I put this without someone getting really fucking mad with me?
It's for kids.
Yeah, it's traditionally aimed at a younger audience. It's a lot more formulaic, and there aren't really consequences in the same way that you might see in other series. Whereas Gundam was like, no, we are all about the consequences here. We are all about the idea of the crew developing and changing and growing or falling apart over time as well. Because let's not forget, the relationships between the characters aren't just improving all the time. Like Amuro and Frau start off incredibly close, and then by the end of the series, they've largely drifted drifted apart, and they actually comment on that. To go back to like the consequences and the idea of development as well, that's hard baked into the plot, because at the start, when, as we mentioned, it's a bunch of kids that are crewing the white base, and when they start, they are just a bunch of terrified children who really don't know what they're doing and are surviving by the skin of their teeth, largely through good luck and the fact that Amuro has space autism, so he can pilot the Gundam real good. Throughout it, they grow and they develop, they become more hardened to the realities of all the fighting, and then by the end of it, they are absolute fucking badasses. Like, they are destroying entire fleets of Xeon ships, and other Federation soldiers are watching them going like, what the fuck is wrong with those children? How the fuck are they this good at this? Holy shit. Oh, and speaking of consequences as well, we haven't actually mentioned it yet. We talked about Ryu earlier, but and this is, again, something... F's in the chat. We're probably going to get shouted about this as well, because, yeah, obviously some people have died in mecha shows before. That's not what we're saying. What we're trying to say is that Gundam was...
The first one where it fucking actually mattered. Come at me, Brett.
Ryu was not just some side character. He wasn't just... I mean, Gundam does this as well, where they introduce a character and then he gets fucking killed off in the
Thanks
next
to me now.
Cheers, Domino. Poor old Slager Law. He deserved better. But Ryu wasn't just like a character who was introduced and then killed like a fucking red shirt. He's been there from the start. He is an important, integral part of the crew, and he fucking dies. And that sticks with the rest of the surviving crew for the rest of the series. They are still talking about him later on down the line. They're still mourning him. That's pretty unique. I don't know if you saw that as much at the time, because this is like the defining template for real robot shit. That's setting a trend there that would continue. And that's a pretty impactful trend, the idea that you can take a principal character and kill them off, and you've got to then live with the consequences of that. That's pretty bold. We're still pretending that this is a review channel, aren't we? We got to do negatives. Rob, do us a negatives.
Jesus Christ, the quality.
It's a bit patchy in places.
I see why it was cancelled.
I think a lot of the problems with this series as a whole comes from the fact that it wasn't given the support that it needed by the people funding its creation, because they were bankrolling something that was trying something unique and different, and then got cold feet halfway through and tried to pull out. And as a result, a lot of the problems that I have with it, and the problems that you just identified there with, the quality being a bit spotty in places, I think that stems from the fact that they were trying to stretch a not great budget across a pretty big production, and then had to deal with the fact that they were getting whole episode arcs slashed, because they were like, nah, we told you had 52 episodes. Actually, you've got 39 now, motherfuckers. So see all that stuff about new types that you haven't really been able to introduce yet? Better fucking introduce that soon, boy, otherwise you're not gonna.
She could have been a mother to me,
Stop. Stop it immediately. It's less the creative team's fault. They were doing the best that they could with the limited resources that they had, but it's why certain things like Lala feels a little bit rushed, I guess, because she kind of just drops in towards the end.
Well, you could have been a mother to me, David.
I'm leaving the show. But yeah, no, Lala doesn't really get the time that she probably deserved to really sort of develop as a character. She's just kind of there, and then she fucking dies, and it probably should have been bigger than it felt within the story, I felt, anyway. Char's motivations, he feels a little bit schizophrenic towards the end of the series. He starts off as this, like, terrifying Xeon army officer, and then it turns out that he's got this, like, extra depth and complexity to him where he's actually out to destroy the Zabi family, so he murders his friend Garma, and then he gets weirdly caught up in all the stuff to do with new types and stops trying to kill all of the Zabis for a little bit, and then in the final episode he's like, oh, I was supposed to kill all these guys, wasn't I? So he fucking headshots a bitch through a spaceship, which is great, don't get me wrong, cool move, but it felt a little bit rushed there as well. I think that's, if there was one word to describe the problems, it stems from the fact that all of this is quite rushed, because they were panicking and trying to get a load of shit done within a month, and yeah, you can't always do that. I think as well, and this is partly to do with the issues with being rushed to finish it, but also with their pacing. I didn't really notice, and this is maybe something to do with the translation that I had, I didn't really see any references to the whole new type phenomenon earlier on in the series, and I think that was a missed opportunity. I would have maybe dropped some hints about that earlier on so you could build on those, whereas at least the way it's written originally in the TV series, it feels like that's just something that kind of gets sprung on you towards the end. It's like, oh yeah, new types, those are a thing, by the way. It's really important. It's kind of part of the core philosophy of the original founder of Xeon. New types, they're a thing. We've not mentioned them before, but yeah.
Just so we're clear, Dave, do you know what episode that's introduced into Gundam?
What episode is that?
37.
Yeah. So what? 5 episodes
from the end.
Good stuff. For all that's partly to do with, the episode runtime being cut. You probably could have mentioned them a little earlier, Tomino. Come on, man. Yeah, there's really not a lot of grumbles that I can make about it. I mean, if you don't like older animation, you're gonna really struggle with this, because it's a bit spotty in places. But if you're willing to kind of look past that, or see this as a relic from a time when they didn't have all the modern methods of animation that they do now, you can still really enjoy this. And if you look past that, there's still some fucking great fights here and some really, really quality art. So yeah, you can have fun. Right then, that brings us nicely to the conclusion. Robert, please conclude this video on Mobile Suit Gundam.
I find talking about things like this really difficult because, I'm such a fan of Gundam that I just want people to watch it. I think it's such an interesting philosophical show for what's essentially a Saturday morning cartoon show. But it brings up all these valid points about conflict, about politics, about philosophy, about growing up, and its influence on myself and my own political views are huge, I would say. What more do you want me to say, Dave?
No. Yeah, no, it's really hard to overstate the importance of this series and just how much it changed fucking everything for mecha and for anime and for manga. It's the inspiration and the source material that has created so many important franchises over the years. Name any fucking mecha that came out after this that is considered to be important or impactful. They were taking their cues from this.
Well, if you've seen the interview, they're interviewing Guillermo del Toro, right? And it's him and the Japanese actress that played the little girl in Pacific Rim. They sent him and her to the Gundam Museum, and he is just this giant child talking about how much different mecha that they're looking at. It's like big models of it in the museum. It's like, this influenced this in my movies, and this influenced this in the Pacific Rim, this influenced the designs and stuff. And it's like, that's how I feel about Gundam. I can't
I mean, it's so massive in terms of its cultural impact in Japan as well. They are building a life-size RX-78-2.
They built it.
They've built it now. It's finished. You can go and visit it. It fucking moves. It's awesome. It is their Star Wars, man. And it should be our Star Wars as well, because let's be real here, Star Wars is taking a bit of a downward trend recently. So time for a replacement, boys.
Emperor Palpatine could have been a mother to me.
I get why this kicked off and why it inspired the franchise that it did and why it's inspired so many people since. It is a very interesting show. Not everything that it's doing here works, but it's laying the groundwork for everything that Gundam is known for, from its moral ambiguity and complexity to its discussion and critique of war and its effects on people, its fucking hype space battles, and its focus on characters and their interactions and their development. That's all stuff that Gundam is famous for, and you can see it in embryo here. If you are a fan of mecha, and if you're watching this channel, let's be real, you probably fucking are. If you're a fan of anime in general and its history and its development, this is 100% a series you should watch. It's not perfect, but it is nonetheless vitally important for the genre as a whole. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
TED Talk, eh?
We should probably say a little more something about the fact that there's now 2,000 people pressing the subscribe button on this.
Why?
Didn't expect that. What the fuck? What are you people doing?
If you want more and more Ted Kaczynski content, please like and subscribe.
Remember when this was going to be just some dumb podcast that we were going to do? We were going to get 100 subscribers and then stop? Maybe? What the fuck?
I still don't understand why people watch our shit.
It's not good. I'm literally just making stuff that makes me laugh, and I am not not a funny person.
I mean, you're funny to look at.
That's fair. Thanks, I guess. I don't know. I don't do sincerity or emotions because feelings are gay.
Oh, hey, I'm just reading the guy on Twitter who, his name is in Hebrew, so, you know, one of our guys probably. This is great. Now an excuse to tell you that I watched Samurai Flamenco. Thank you. That's what all the 2,000 subscribers. Oh, and the fact you should review Pat Labor. Right, you little shit.
I don't know. I find it very astounding that we have managed to get to 2,000 subscribers with no regular uploads, no general idea of what we're doing, and absolutely no intention of doing anything other than whatever the fuck we want to do. But apparently 2,000 people want to come along for the ride, and that's really cool. So cheers guys.
Next we will review Megas XLR, where we'll just go nice, and that'll be the end of the video.